This isn't just a breakup story. This is the moment everything behind the scenes starts to collapse. Secrets, money, power, and control are all about to be exposed. And what happens next could change everything you thought you knew about this family. So make sure you hit subscribe right now because you do not want to miss what we uncover next. The story begins with a shift, so subtle at first that it almost feels like nothing has changed. Yet beneath the surface, everything is already unraveling. Because for years, the structure of this family relied on a delicate balance of emotion, loyalty, and unspoken agreements. And now, that balance is being tested in a way no one expected. Janelle, who was once seen as the steady, logical force, quietly holding things together, is no longer playing that role. She is stepping into something entirely different, something that feels stronger, clearer, and far more intentional. And the moment that transformation became visible was the moment the rumors began to spread, not just about her moving on, but about who she is moving on with and why that matters so much. Because this is not just a new relationship, this is a complete shift in power, a shift that threatens to expose everything that has been kept in the shadows for years. The whispers describe a man who was calm where chaos once ruled, a man who listens where others spoke over her, a man who understands systems, numbers, and long-term thinking in a way that feels almost surgical. And that alone is enough to create tension because it suggests that the confusion that once protected certain decisions may no longer exist. And when confusion disappears, clarity takes its place. And clarity leads to questions. And those questions are what create fear, because for the first time, there is a real possibility that every financial decision, every shared asset, every complicated agreement could be examined with precision and without emotion. And that changes everything, because emotion can be influenced, but numbers cannot be persuaded. And as soon as that engagement ring appears, it becomes more than a symbol of love. It becomes a signal, a turning point, a declaration that the past will no longer dictate the future. And that declaration carries weight because it is backed by action, not just words. And as soon as that ring is seen, the conversation shifts from speculation to anticipation, because people begin to realize that this is not just about moving on. This is about moving forward with intention and with support from someone who understands the implications of every step. And that is where the tension begins to build, because while one side is stepping into clarity, the other side is left trying to hold on to a structure that is no longer stable. And the attempts to maintain control begin to surface in ways that feel both urgent and desperate. Because when something you relied on for years starts to slip away, the instinct is to pull it back, to restore it, to reassert authority. But authority without trust does not hold. And that is the reality that is slowly becoming impossible to ignore. And it all leads to a moment that feels almost symbolic, an attempt to gather everyone together, to bring back the old dynamic, to recreate the environment where decisions were made and followed without question. But when that moment arrives, the silence is overwhelming because no one comes, no one responds, no one participates. And that absence is louder than any confrontation could ever be, because it shows that the influence once held is no longer recognized. And that realization marks the true beginning of the shift. Because once people stop responding to authority, that authority no longer exists. And as that truth settles in, the contrast between the past and the present becomes impossible to ignore. Because on one side, there is still an attempt to hold on to control, to maintain a narrative that no longer fits the reality. And on the other side, there is a clear movement toward independence, toward decisions that are made with purpose and supported by knowledge. And that contrast is what drives the story forward, because it creates a tension that cannot be resolved easily. It creates a situation where every action has consequences, and every decision moves the story closer to an outcome that feels inevitable, yet still uncertain. And as the focus begins to shift toward the financial side of things, the stakes become even higher, because this is where the real impact will be felt, not just emotionally, but practically. Because when shared assets are involved, when properties are tied to multiple names, when investments have been made over years without clear separation, the process of untangling those connections is complex and often difficult. And when that process is approached with expertise, it becomes even more significant. Because it means that nothing will be overlooked, nothing will be ignored, and nothing will be left unresolved. And that is where the fear truly begins to take shape, because the idea of a thorough examination of finances is not just about numbers. It is about accountability, it is about transparency, and it is about facing decisions that may have been made under different circumstances, with different expectations. And now, those decisions are being brought into the light and examined in a way that leaves little room for interpretation. And as that possibility becomes more real, the urgency to act, to respond, to regain some sense of control becomes stronger. But the challenge is that control cannot be forced. It cannot be demanded. It must be recognized. And when recognition is gone, the only option left is to adapt. And adaptation is not always easy, especially when it requires letting go of long-held beliefs and adjusting to a reality that feels unfamiliar and uncertain. And that is where the story becomes even more compelling, because it is no longer just about what is happening. It is about how people respond to what is happening. It is about the choices they make, the actions they take, and the way they navigate a situation that is constantly evolving. And as the narrative continues to build, there is a growing sense that something significant is approaching, something that will bring clarity to the confusion and resolution to the tension. But until that moment arrives, the uncertainty remains. And it is that uncertainty that keeps the story moving, that keeps the attention focused, and that keeps everyone wondering what will happen next. Because every detail, every development, every rumor adds another layer to the narrative and brings it closer to a point where everything will finally be revealed. And when that moment comes, it will not just be a continuation of the story, it will be a turning point that defines everything that follows. As the tension continues to rise, the situation begins to move beyond speculation and into something far more tangible, because what once felt like distant rumors now carries the weight of real consequences and real outcomes. And the shift is no longer subtle. It is visible in actions, in decisions, and in the silence that follows those decisions. Because silence in this context is not empty. It is deliberate. It is a boundary. It is a refusal to engage in patterns that no longer serve a purpose. And that refusal is what creates the strongest impact, because it cannot be argued with, it cannot be manipulated, and it cannot be dismissed as easily as words can. And as this new dynamic takes shape, the focus turns toward the financial reality that has been building beneath the surface for years, a reality that is now being brought into the spotlight with a level of clarity that changes everything. Because when finances are examined closely, when assets are evaluated with precision, and when ownership is defined without ambiguity, the entire structure that once held everything together begins to look very different. And that difference is what creates both opportunity and fear. Opportunity for those who are ready to move forward with transparency and fairness, and fear for those who are not prepared to face the full picture. And as reports continue to circulate about possible legal steps, about documents being reviewed, and about the potential for significant financial restructuring, the pressure becomes impossible to ignore, because these are not minor adjustments. These are actions that could reshape the entire foundation of what was once considered stable and secure. And while one side appears to be moving with purpose, guided by logic and supported by expertise, the other side is left reacting, trying to keep up, trying to understand, and trying to maintain a sense of control in a situation that no longer responds to the same methods. And that imbalance creates a sense of urgency that is reflected in every attempt to address the situation, every effort to bring people back into the conversation, every move that is made to slow down or redirect the process. But the reality is that once a decision has been made to move forward with clarity, there is very little that can stop that momentum, because clarity, once achieved, is difficult to reverse. And as the story progresses, the emotional layer becomes just as significant as the financial one, because behind every decision, behind every action, there are relationships that are being redefined, connections that are being reevaluated, and roles that are being reconsidered. And this is where the impact becomes deeply personal, because it is not just about numbers. It is about trust, it is about respect, and it is about the realization that the dynamics that once existed are no longer sustainable. And as that realization settles in, the responses vary. Some choose to step back, some choose to support, and some struggle to accept the change. But regardless of the response, the direction is clear. The past cannot be recreated, and the future will not follow the same path. And that understanding is what drives the narrative forward, because it creates a sense of inevitability, a sense that the outcome is approaching, even if the exact details are not yet fully known. And as the anticipation builds, there is also a growing awareness of the broader implications of what is happening, because this is not just an isolated situation. It reflects a larger theme of independence, accountability, and the importance of making informed decisions, especially when it comes to shared responsibilities and long-term commitments. And that theme resonates because it is relatable, it is relevant, and it highlights the complexity of navigating change in a way that is both responsible and forward-thinking. And as the final pieces of the puzzle begin to come into view, there is still an element of uncertainty that keeps the story alive, because there are still questions that need to be answered, still details that need to be confirmed, and still outcomes that need to unfold. And that uncertainty is what maintains the suspense, because it leaves room for possibilities, for unexpected developments, and for moments that could shift the direction once again. And as everything continues to evolve, one thing remains certain. This is a turning point, a moment that will define what comes next, not just in terms of financial resolution, but in terms of personal growth and emotional clarity. And as the story moves closer to its next phase, the focus will remain on how these changes are navigated, how the outcomes are achieved, and how the individuals involved continue to adapt to a reality that is very different from the one they once knew. And it is that journey that keeps the attention focused, that keeps the interest alive, and that ensures the story continues to unfold in a way that is both compelling and meaningful. Because at its core, this is not just about conflict or resolution. It is about transformation and the process of moving from one chapter to the next with a deeper understanding of what truly matters and how to build a future that